start with your view, I suppose, on the current turmoil, and put it this way. You detail in your book the class of 83, if I could call it that, the Labour intake of 1983, which contained two future Prime Ministers, Mr Blair and yourself. Might it contain a third, in that that was when Jeremy Corbyn was elected as well? Do you see the prospect of him becoming Prime Minister, the next Labour Prime Minister after you, that prospect becoming more realistic?
Well, I don't think you ever sort of assume that something's going to happen. You've really got to work for it over the next few years. There may not be an election until 2022, but Jeremy Corbyn is a phenomenon. I mean, he has managed to change the nature of political debate in this country. He ran an excellent campaign at the election. Interestingly enough, the issues that he's talking about, I would agree with what he says about universal credit, and we've got to get rid of it because it's not going to work in the way it's fashioned with 3 billion cuts. What he says about tuition fees, I've always favoured a graduate tax. What he's saying about the health service, 20 billion money needed by 2022. The health service is at breaking point in certain places on inequality. So Jeremy Corbyn is speaking to an agenda where people are angry about what's happening. But the biggest issue is people's concerns about taming globalization, and it's as true of America as it is of Europe, as it is of Britain. And I think that this is the dominant issue of this time, how we can deal with the insecurities and the inequalities that have arisen from this tumultuous period of change that I was living through and I'm writing about from the 1980s onwards, when we had the globalization of the economy, the destruction of much of manufacturing, the movement of power to Asia, and the inequalities and insecurities that have arisen from this. And Jeremy Corbyn is a reflection of people's worries about these things.
But just on the minutiae, I suppose, of political machinations at the moment, you say there might not be an election till 2022. There might be one an awful lot sooner. Looking at the government, do you see it falling apart?
Well, I don't see it. I think it is falling apart, and I think you don't know. I mean, I don't know who's in the cabinet from one minute to the next, and there's been so many changes. But you see, the Conservative Party is riven by its splits over Europe, and she can't solve that. Even a cabinet reshuffle has got to reflect some balance of power between the anti-Europeans and the pro-Europeans. And until we can resolve this issue of Europe properly, and until we have a sense of direction for this country, I feel that Britain is losing its confidence. And I feel that she's got to show that there is purpose and direction to this country. And that's not just about standards in public life, which has been the issue of last week. It's about dealing with tax havens. It's about dealing with the health service. And I feel that we're in a period which is quite unprecedented, where the government does not have direction. Now, a Labour Party to win an election has got to do three things. You've got to have your principles there, and to return to first principles in opposition is the normal thing that all parties do. But then you've got to have a plan and a programme, and then you've got to popularise it. And of course, Jeremy and his team have got some time now, if there's no election immediately, to develop the plan and get a popular programme underway. We spent ages between 1983 and 1997 under Neil Kinnock and John Smith and then Tony Blair to get that winnable programme, and he's got to do this in a very short period of time.
Now, you mentioned Theresa May. I mean, do you have some sympathy for perhaps one aspect of her personality which was exposed during the 2017 election, in that you write in your book there that you weren't a touchy-feely politician? You say, for me, being conspicuously demonstrative is uncomfortable. That could easily have been written by Theresa May.
Well, possibly. I mean, I'm the son of a Church of Scotland minister. She was the daughter of Anglican clergyman. I mean, I was brought up to believe that you get on with the job. You don't show your feelings in public. You're actually reticent and undemonstrative. And it was very difficult for me because I went through a period where I was exposed in public to huge attention when my daughter died, you may remember, and my son was born in cystic fibrosis. And then at the same time, I was trying to protect my sons from the media glare. I didn't want them to grow up thinking that they had somehow were terribly special in the sense of being in the public eye. And so I took a very different view from other politicians to keeping my sons in private. And when I left Downing Street, people wrote me letters and said, because my sons walked out with me, they didn't actually know that I had children, and they didn't know that there was such warmth as they saw of a family. So it may have been a mistake, but for me, it's what you do and to be judged on what you achieve rather than what you say or what style you have or whether you're a showman or whether you're slick. And I'm not that kind of politician. And perhaps in the social media age and also the television age, it's a more difficult thing to do. But I would prefer to be judged by what I did and what I achieved rather than how I sounded.
Let me turn to another issue, perhaps one of your towering or most remembered achievements, which is, of course, the independence of the Bank of England, which you announced very, very soon after assuming power. When you read Tony Blair's autobiography, he actually says it's his idea. Quite explicitly, he says on page 113 of My Journey, I formed the desire to give monetary policy over to the Bank of England. Gordon had come to the same conclusion. I mean, there's other passages as well where he said, in truth, as with the Bank of England independence, the broad framework on the economy, never mind anything else, was set by me. So it was Blair, not Brown.
Well, I don't really want to get into that, but the fact of the matter is that the plan for the Bank of England independence was actually drawn up by Ed Balls, and he did all this work on it in 1994 after putting it forward to me as a proposal. Even in the days before the general election of 1997, we had not decided that we'd go ahead immediately. It was not in the Labour Party's manifesto. And it was only on the Monday before the election that I actually decided we will go ahead with this and we will do it immediately. And so it happened the next Tuesday, and it happened suddenly, and it didn't go through the cabinet, and it was I had to phone the cabinet members to get it through. So, Tony supported the independence of the Bank of England. I actually was determined to do it immediately. We got into government, and I think we've got to give Ed Balls some credit for drawing up the plan.
Okay, but Tony actually says, quite explicitly, as I say, that he came up with it, and he says I allowed Gordon to make the statement, and indeed gave him every paean of praise. I'll put my glasses on to read the rest because it's important. And status in becoming the major economic figure of the government. I did this because I thought he deserved it, because it was good for the whole thing, not to look like a one-man show, i.e. Tony Blair's, and thirdly, not doing so would have created considerable tension, but it had an unfortunate and long-lasting consequence.
Well, it was Ed Balls and I that drew up the plan. I mean, we actually worked on it for years, not for weeks. I think the plan was actually the one that was eventually implemented by the Treasury. So I think you can go back into the records, and that's what will be shown. But Tony was very supportive of the independence of the Bank of England, as was I. And to be honest, it's all history now. But
what isn't history is, and it seems we're on the subject, what isn't history is the tension between you and Mr. Blair. I mean, do you ever regret, just overall, some of the rage that you had about his reneging on the deal?
I don't think it was rage, I'll be honest. I think it was disappointment. You see, the thing about politics is that you've got to take a broader view of this. There's only a particular shelf life that you do have in politics. You've got to I know media interviewers and celebrities like yourself will last a long time, but for a politician, people get fed up. I mean, they see someone who's under interrogation almost 24 hours a day, the intrusive media, everything about this politician within a few weeks of them taking office. You get fed up with them, you get bored, their characteristics start to annoy you. So I don't think politicians in the future are going to last more than an American president. American president's 8 years, but by 6 people are getting used to the next one, and you're really written off after 6. And I would have thought 6 years is about the most. My problem was I'd been Chancellor for 10 years, and therefore I'd been at the top of politics with Tony and other people in the cabinet for that period of time. People knew me, and I think it was very difficult then for people to see...
Whatever you did, whatever happened.
Yeah, and it was very difficult for people to see that, when I took over from Tony, it was a complete change from what had happened before, and I wanted to emphasise continuity as well. So I think Tony and I have got to get used to the idea that there's a limit to the number of years you're going to have at the top in politics, and I think the Conservative Party are seeing that at the moment. It may be less of a limit now in the second decade of the 21st century, but you can't assume that you're going to have a long shelf life at the top of politics, and I didn't, and And perhaps, if we changed over a bit earlier, things might have been different, yes.
Gordon Brown, it's been fascinating talking to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Dermot.
Appreciate that.